How important was it having Matt Robinson and Al Fisher in this game to get you that?
They're unbelievable players, and they've helped us. You know, they won the game for us. We didn't do very well up front, and the penalties were killing us. So, you know, excited to have the win, but really disappointed in how we played.
Hello and welcome back to the Trinity League Football Podcast. I'm Dan Albano with the Orange County Register and OC Varsity, and I'm joined once again by our Trinity League insider, Scott Barajas. We're going to be previewing this week's games for Friday, September 1st, and we're also going to hand out our grades for the season openers last week on August 25th. Scotty, how you doing? And it's a very big week coming up in the Trinity with the Trinity League and one specific team in general. But how you doing before we get right into it?
I'm good. I'm just trying to stay cool in this heat. And I know everybody else is. It is going to be a big week. I think everybody's looking forward to this game, and I just hope that it lives up to its billing. So.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting week. The Trinity League and teams throughout Southern California are probably adjusting their practice schedules. There's going to be. I talked to a couple teams today that are going to be practicing in the evening, and maybe even practice in the morning. But mostly teams are going to be practicing at night, and hopefully things cool off by the time Friday comes off. But the action's going to be extremely hot. We're talking about the Mater Dei game on Friday, playing host to Bishop Gorman, pretty much a number 1 and number 2 matchup in the nation, according to some polls. So it's going to be a terrific game. Scotty and I are both going to be there, so we're going to have a lot of coverage from that game next week. The voice that we opened up the show with, that was Jay Sarah coach Pat Harlow. And Coach Harlow earned his first victory with the Lions last week in a 45-27 victory against Corona Del Mar, game that I covered for the Register. And Lions look pretty good. But like a lot of teams this year, have a lot of things to work on as well, but did a lot of good things right, and we'll be covering that in the course of our show. But as we've done in the last couple of years, Scotty, let's hand out our grades and take a brief look back at the week. The opening games. There was one big surprise I think we'll probably agree on with the result with St. John Bosco. And as we work our way through the course of the show, we're going to have some our players of the week for each team, and we're also going to have our previews for this week's games led by an extended preview of the Mater Dei Bishop Gorman game. But let's recap a little bit last week, Scotty. Let's start with that surprise, which was St. John Bosco, the defending Division I champions, defending Open champions in the state of California, went to Aquinas of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and lost in overtime 9-3. So a very low-scoring game. St. John Bosco had high hopes for this game. They had gone early to prepare, but obviously they struggled mightily on offense. What was your grade and thoughts on that opener for St. John Bosco?
Yeah, the grade is a good one offensively. I'm going to have to give them a D-.
Right.
On offense, and I give them an A on defense. Starting with their offense, they lost to a great St. Thomas Aquinas defense that's totally filled with D1 recruits, but the Brave offense just looked out of sync. They could never get on track. They did move the ball into the red zone on 4 possessions, but it could only come away with 3 points, including in the overtime game. Bosco struggles when you make them one-dimensional, and that's what happened. They couldn't get the running game going consistently, and, then it makes their passing game non-existent. And Bosco needs to be balanced and efficient, for Real to be Real. And, he struggled. I think he threw 3 picks. I don't know. I think Helani was probably their leading. I don't have the stats on Helani, but I think Helani was their leading rusher. I think Real ran off. I think he had 2 runs where he had 2 15-yard runs, and that was pretty much it. And then defensively, they played, as well as they could for a defense. Cole Aubrey, led them with 2 sacks, and he was constant pressure on them all the time. St. Thomas was playing with their backup quarterback actually, and the starter got put out last week, so that was tough on them. But the Braves rotated their defensive front seven, and they were fresh all night, and they held them to under total 100 yards of total offense. So the Braves probably won't see a defense with that much speed this year. It's a soldier. They will probably see some real good defensive units. But now teams have that blueprint to see what to do to disrupt that offense.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up the stats on St. John Bosco. Yeah, they're not on max preps, but they had a third quarter field goal, and that was it. And Aquinas, in regulation, just had a first quarter field goal, and that was it. Scotty, are you alarmed with it? Because if you think about Bosco, they haven't lost many season openers, in the last couple of years. It is a tough journey to go cross country like that, but they have done a lot of traveling. But they've usually been pretty sharp in openers.
Yeah, they have. That's what's kind of crazy. And we'll talk about another top-rated team that had a so-so opener with their offense, but and sometimes I don't know if these teams are, we've always talked about these teams being overworked during the summer,
right?
Too much into it, and then by the time the season comes, they're already tired. I thought about that the other day. I was trying to think about it, but it is what it is, and but you're also coming in and you're playing these national championship games right off the bat. So, and you're playing against guys that have just as much speed as you do, and, maybe your teams aren't up to, offenses always seem to take more time to get in sync, and having to come in and play defense right off the bat. But it's Bosco, and, everybody thought they would put up much more of a fight offensively, but it didn't happen. But one other thing to consider is that their offensive line is also new.
Yeah.
So they're, and that's, they lost, the big three daddy-O's, and they replaced them with, I think a couple of transfers, but those guys aren't high-profile guys. And so, whether or not, they're going to be, get it done the rest of the year, who knows, but that's pretty much what I saw as far as their offense goes, and the running game couldn't get on track. I think Helani actually carried the ball more than Flowers did, but because Flowers is a big back, he was getting 2 yards, 3 yards. He could cut. They were already on him. So, but this week I think it'll be a whole different story. But we'll touch bases on that later. But that's what I got out of it. So, and it's early, and Bosco regroup, and I know they regrouped when they lost to Mater Dei, and look what happened. So, good teams do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch their offense, emerge throughout the year, because they play a great schedule, and they're not going to be challenged this week, but we'll get to see their offense again against another quality opponent. Because the thing of what I saw, or what I thought about when I saw the score was, I thought back, well, the last time I saw St. John Bosco, which was at the Edison Passing Tournament, they also did not have a great offensive day that day either. And
exactly.
And that was a little concerning to me, so I'm wondering if there's going to be a trend. But it was a very tough opener. That was the first opener they've lost under Jason Negro, as far as I can remember. But again, a very difficult opener. But we'll see how the Braves bounce back. Another game, a couple other games to touch on last week. I think the other game, obviously it was a big game for Mater Dei, opening up on the road against Bishop Amat. And I think the Monarchs answered some questions. Obviously, we'll get to your grades here in a second, but, obviously JT Daniels' health was of pretty big concern. I think people were wondering how he was going to be doing, and how rusty was he going to be. Rested his arm during the summer, but came out pretty well. He didn't throw it a lot. He was 16 of 23 for 179 yards, 1 TD, and 1 interception. But Monarchs were pretty balanced, kind of like what they ran the ball more than that. They ran it 34 times, and they passed it 23. So they were maybe in that 65-35 range, maybe 60-40 maybe in favor of the run. But they didn't. Their defense did pretty well and didn't allow any points, in this victory, 31-7 until 4 seconds left. But what were your grades for the Monarchs, Scotty?
I gave them a B- for offense, and of course defense. They got the A. I know a lot of people, including yourself, thought MB was going to pick up where they left off, and air raid it, but that wasn't the case. They chose to go more balanced. In fact, it was more underwhelming and workmanlike, less prolific. They turned out, like you said, I think over 180 yards. I think I have different rushing yards, but but they pretty much ran, like you said, 34 times. They rushed the ball. They ate clock. They gained, yards in chunks, 4 7-yard chunk runs. But the defense, played stellar. They racked up 7 sacks, led by Andrew Falio, who had 3 of them.
Right.
Samuela, 2. Malimaka had 1. Nate Lagaleo had 1. Sir Barnes had 1, and I think Funa had the other. Amat was held to under 100 yards off total offense. And like you said, they scored on the last play of the game. Amat, you'll like this one. Amat's longest gain of the night was the scoop-up fumble by the center who rumbled down the sideline for 30 yards.
Wow.
And that's what set up the final score. So he gets sacked, and then and the quarterback fumbles, and he scoops up and goes down to like the 5-yard line, and then they scored in the next play. So, that was pretty much, the game. It was just kind of like everybody always says, vanilla. It was a balance. It was like the old modern day, fullback. I said two tight ends, and just kind of run it. But we'll touch more on that later. But that was pretty much that game. They just came in, got the job done, and wanted to get JT just some work, and he looked a little off at times. But his biggest play was actually a big run.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
25 yards. I thought it was
34 yards officially.
Yeah, and but he juked through the guys. He cut back, and then but he looked a lot faster. It was surprising. Everyone was shocked. But and he had another scramble earlier in the game too. So and I don't think you don't want to see him do that, but obviously he feels confident enough to do that when he has pressure or he sees an open field. But I wouldn't take that into consideration that he's going to be a dual threat now. But it was kind of shocking to see. So that he's improved that part of his game. So
no, that was a tremendous run. He made a great cut, and he's got some good size, and he really. He really was charging upfield, and nobody could get to him. And then he did a nice wave to the fans in the end zone seats. So
the crazy student section, the rowdy student section. Yeah, it was all in good. It was all sportsmanlike. It was I don't some people say he was being, but it was all good fun.
Yeah, JT ran for 42 yards, and he was their second leading rusher. The Monarchs, for those scoring at home, rushed for 144 as a team. So, fine, like you said, workman-like performance. The game I saw, I think, was a pretty notable game. Jay Serra, like we said, defeated Corona Del Mar 45-27. Corona Del Mar and Jay Serra, both their offenses look superb in terms of their athletes, and some of their design and schemes were very good. Neither team committed a turnover in this game. Jay Serra hurt itself with about 8 penalties for about 80 or 90 yards. So they were heavily penalized. They had a kickoff return nullified by for a touchdown. So they could have scored a few more points. They left some points in their back pocket, and they still scored 45. Corona Del Mar is no slouch. Like I said, Corona Del Mar, no turnovers, very few penalties, and they have 2 of the best receivers in Orange County, and Tay Lee, and really the star receiver was John Humphreys, a sophomore. He was spectacular, but Matt Robinson for Jay Serra looked great. Threw it really very well. He's got those receivers. Tariq Luckett, who I know you're high on, Scotty, he looked really legit. As a junior, he's tall, runs good routes, catches everything. He's playing with a lot of confidence. He's a really good receiver. Munar caught a deep pass, about 66. Munar McLean, 66-yard TD. He looked outstanding. And a guy that you were high on, Al Fisher, is the real deal at running back. He's extremely quick. He gets his motor going very fast. He didn't necessarily have a lot of holes to run through. I think Jay Serra's O-line did not really impose their will, but Fisher made some things happen. Rushed for 101. For me, I think the big takeaway on Jay Serra was, their defensive backs struggled, but they were against really good receivers, which they'll see in the Trinity League from some teams. But they struggled. But their defensive line with Abdul Malik McLean did all right. Their linebackers were okay. CDM's got a good running back in J.T. Murphy. But they gave, Jay Serra still gave up 27 points. But what was your impressions and grades on this game?
Yeah, I gave the offense an A and the defense a B minus. What we already kind of knew that Algie Fisher was going to be solid and to go with Robinson's moxie, they were going to get it done. And it seems that Jay Serra had at times had their way with CDM on offense. But were the Lions were they ever tested? I know defensively it looks like like they're going to need to tighten up some of the reins. With the 27 points given up, but they got their stops when they needed it. And like we were talking about the small defensive backs, it seems like John Humphreys, who's 6'3", had his way, caught 2 TDs. It looked like he went over the top on both of them. And we all know what looms in the Trinity League, like you just mentioned. So that's going to be their Achilles heel. Hopefully they'll, their pass rush will help them out, to help those secondary guys out with schemes and whatnot. But in all, like I said, Jay Serra's going to be right there, and they may surprise, down the line. And it's early in the season, but, they're already, like we said last week, they're ahead of where they've been the last couple of seasons. So,
and I'll have to do a little bit more research on these guys, but Coach Harlow said they had a couple guys, a couple linemen that were out. And I'll have to check my notes exactly why they were out or if they were holdouts or whatever. But they might have they had a few more guys that they could have played, and maybe that would have made a difference. One interesting note that our fans of our Trinity League podcast might be interested. We talked about Jameel Henning, transfer from Buena Park. I wanted to share how like I said, Al Fisher looked great. He was the most of the running back. They did not bring Henning in until the fourth quarter, kind of probably to give a little change of pace for Corona Del Mar. And Fisher had done his thing, but Henning was played a lot of cornerback for them, and I think that's kind of revealing that it shows that they do need him at that position, and that's maybe. And I think you'll probably see Fisher there at cornerback as well. They're going to need all they're good athletes. They're going to have to play DB.
Right. I think everybody's doing that in the Trinity League. With those nickel and dime packages, they're putting the best athletes on the field.
Another victory. Like we said, everybody in the Trinity League won last week, with the exception of St. John Bosco. But Servite went on the road, won 35-21 at Norco. Julius Irvin, senior safety, had 3 interceptions in that game for the Friars. So he had a great game. He was one of our candidates for OC Varsity Defensive Player of the Week. He didn't get it, but he was right there. But what's your thoughts on Servite? Getting a fought for road victory. We'd known that Norco was okay. You had seen the scrimmage against Norco. They were okay. They kind of played Jay Serra tough, but the pads went on, and the Friars got the W.
Yeah, their offense I give an A minus, and their defense I gave them a B plus. Servite put out its version of the CC, the Centennial, fast, tempo read option offense. didn't produce the same, Centennial-like numbers, but they were solid, led by TJ McMahon, who threw for 245, and I think he ran for another 117. And then the Friars put a show on with numerous highlight-making plays. One was a 64-yard touchdown pass to DeLon Hurt, who broke 3 tackles, and then he made like several tacklers miss on the way, to the end zone. And that was, if you can look up that play, it was a great play. And then on defense, like we said, Julius Erving had 3 picks, and those 3 interceptions were not gimmies. He made plays on the ball on all of them. So that was shows you what type of savvy he has, and I'm interested to see what he does when they play against the big time passing teams. And then defensively as well, they kept Norco's die in check, holding him to under 100 yards, and in the scrimmage he ran all over Jay Sarah. So that was kind of shocking because they had their way with Jay Fitt. Granted, it was a scrimmage, but
right.
And Servite wasn't supposed to have a stout defense up front, and they were led by pretty much their Joe Burras,
Joe Christensen,
who had 2 sacks, and then and then we said Irvin. So it was a good win, because I don't think Servite's come out of the another team that hasn't come out of the gate well in the last few years, and they did here.
Yeah, one guy we talked about, I think he was your surprise, and I encourage everybody to check out our shows on Archive, but I believe, Scotty, if my notes are correct, that your surprise performer to watch or under the radar pick for Servite was Spencer Lytle. And he did have 10 total tackles against Norco, and that was team high. One kid that was interesting to me that I did not know much about, but was Jared Amasio, who is another linebacker. Christensen's a linebacker, but he had 7 tackles, and he's a sophomore.
He's a transfer from Orange Lutheran.
Okay.
So he came from Orange Lou. He was there. He came over as I know we didn't touch on a lot, and we touched on some, but just you threw that name out to me, so it just reminded me.
Okay.
But yeah, he's a Olu transfer. So
actually, I think that's ringing a bell, because they Servite lost. Obviously lost two good guys to Orange Lutheran and Kyle Ford and the Beast, the tight ends whose name I'm blanking on right now. You'll remind me.
Yeah, they made Ethan Ray. They did a baseball trade. There's going to be a player to be named later. I think somebody else had wrote a story about that, and it was actually pretty good. It's kind of funny, but yeah, that's because everybody's switching, teams, and so.
Well, let's talk about those Lancers then as we wrap up we have 2 more games left in our review of the opening week of the season 2017. We thank everybody for joining us on the Trinity League Football Podcast. I'm Dan Albano, and we're talking again with our insider Scott Barajas, who's handing out grades. Orange Lutheran went on the I believe they were on the road 35-0 against La Mirada. We previewed that we didn't think La Mirada was what they've been. They've had a coaching change. They don't have the same buzz around that program, same athletes. So we weren't surprised by this at all, were we, Scotty? 35-0 for Olu. How do you grade the Lancers?
No, I give them a B. Some people are going to say 35-0 and they got a B. Well, I have my reasons for that. Their defense was an A. They pitched the shutout. La Mirada didn't really do anything with the ball. But, that win, it doesn't come without some controversy. Because it's being said that Olu attempted like an onside kick with 1:36 left in the game, but apparently it was a bad squib that looked like an onside kick with no recovery. But the reason why everybody is kind of talking and just about it is because last year Olu, I guess when they lost, there was some bad choice of words or between the handshake when La Mirada upset Olu, and I guess that's where that came from. But also, Olu was still throwing the ball in the waning moments up until they scored that last touchdown with the minute 30 left on the clock. So you take it for what it's worth, where they wanted to maybe work on their offense. It was Oulu did take a 21-0, halftime lead, but they only managed one more score, which was late in the game, second half, and then they got the pick six by Joseph Forrest. For it was about 80 yards. It was a nice interception. Helinski was 20 of 26 for 230 with 3 touchdowns. They scored on the very first play of the game when they took a screen pass. Jojo Hawkins taking it like 70 yards, and then I think Kyle Ford had another TD. So it was like, again, it was sort of workmanlike. They didn't come out roaring. Helinski was, produced well. I don't know how the running game did, or how many. I don't have the stats on that. But just from what I saw, the performances, Oulu did, solid. And as I said, they get that, the B rating. Helinski was probably his best throwing game. And then they'll just build off of this. But
well, that's interesting, and that will be. Those are good reporting on yourself to hear, share some of that, and those will be the kind of things that Trinity League coaches will be monitoring with the Lancers. If any of those claims are indeed true, that's the kind of stuff that you got to be careful about, because some people won't take care, will take note of that, and they might give it back to you. So you have to be careful. So we'll have to monitor how the Lancers are conducting their sportsmanship.
Yeah, it was quoted. He was quoted in the paper. He was fired up for winning, but he was and kids are kids, and he basically wanted to just be he was saying they should lose. They're orange loser, and they should be losing to teams like this, and I think it just kind of came off differently than what he was trying to say. But when those quotes get stuck in the paper, they have a mind of its own and they go. So, but like you said, it's something just to keep an eye on. And this Trinity League is competitive, and everybody wants to win, and everybody wants to be right there. So we'll have to see.
Yep. All right. And the last game of the opening week was Santa Margarita. The Eagles with another shutout themselves, 55-0 against Downey. Story for that game, before we get to Scotty's grades, Josiah Norwood threw 4 touchdowns in his first start with the Eagles. He's a transfer from Troy, dual-threat quarterback, very good athlete, has an offer from Army, among others. So he was a guy that we speculated. I wonder what they'll do with their offense. Well, we talked a lot about what Santa Margarita might do. Well, Josiah threw it 27 times, and the Eagles ran it 31 times. So they were, very balanced. And they give Chad Magyar 12 carries for 113. He averaged, over 9 yards a touch, had 3 touchdowns, and everybody else touched it a few times. Josiah, for people wondering, he had 3 carries for 25 yards. So very balanced attack. We talked a lot about their tight ends. Well, they didn't really, none of those guys really racked up big receiving numbers. It was the guys that we talked about. Malone Matele had 5 catches, and Chad Magyar 5 catches. Those are 2 great running back athletes that they can, as good as anybody in the Trinity League, really, at running back position. So those were the offensive stars. But, Scotty, what do you have on your grades for the Eagles?
I give them an A on offense and an A on defense. Downey was, they were overmatched, but, Santa Margarita, produced, good numbers. They were efficient in everything. He mixed it up. Multiple guys caught the ball. It wasn't just, Norwood, and it wasn't Matele and it wasn't Magyar, even though the 2 backs combined for 10 of his 19 completions. They spread the ball around, and it was all, efficient like. And then Matele, once again, he dazzled with another kickoff return and a punt return for, he didn't score, but both of them were for, 52 yards and 40 yards. And I think he had another one that was on a call back on a penalty, so he lost some of the yardage. But he he is a threat every time he touches the ball. I mean, I wonder why do teams even, will they ever learn? You know, why do they even attempt to kick it to him? So, you know, that it's just, it was good for Santa Margarita to build on. You know, they were one, you know, they're the team that everybody has kind of down on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great for them to, you know, because now it basically everybody is, you know, looks to be pretty much equal, you know, between that 3 to 6 you know, teams look all pretty equal. So it's going to be some good games this year if everybody's, you know, producing. You know, again, their defense wasn't, you know, they didn't get really tested, but, you know, they didn't give up anything. So.
Yes, and one of the guys that had a great game for them defensively is a guy that we talked about that we're high on is Caden Fitch. I think he had a double-digit total tackles. He had 10 total tackles to lead Santa Margarita. He had 8 solos. So Caden Fitch, senior middle linebacker, he was their high guy. They had a guy, another player, Sean Tooney, who was another senior, and he had 9 total tackles, so he was second. And he's also a linebacker. So 2 of their linebackers did well against Downey in that regard. So, well, Scotty, before we move on to this pretty exciting week schedule here for September, all the teams in the Trinity League except one play on Friday, September 1st. Bosco plays on Saturday, September 2nd. We'll talk about the showcase going down in Mission Viejo. But do you want to share some of your players of the week that you picked out in this opening week?
I'll start. We'll go with, you know, Bosco. I mean, obviously, you know, offensively they didn't really have anybody to showcase. Defensive player, I'd go with Cole Aubrey.
Right.
He was just all over the field. He was just pressure after pressure.
Good pick.
For Mater Dei, my defensive player of the game was Andrew Frolio. He had 3 sacks. You know, offensive player of the game, you know, Nico Regimio had 6 catches for like 98 yards. And he had one, you know, great over the back catch that he made. You know, but pretty much Andrew probably got, you know, the overall player for that.
Yeah, and officially they had Nico, the Cal commit. Mater Dei had him 7 catches for 99 yards, and Brew McCoy came in second, 6 for 60 with 1 TD. But I think Nico's a good pick there.
I'm going to go with TJ McMahon for offense, and defense, Julius Irving.
Yeah.
And Olu, I went with Holinsky, and defense, I went with Joseph Forrest, and Santa Margarita, I went with Chad Magar for having the balance, and defense, Caden Fitch for leading them in tackles. Okay.
And I can handle the Jay Serra. You know, I think I'd probably give it to Matt Robinson, who threw for 340 yards, 2 TDs, managed it very well. So he'll, you know, no turnovers. He was nearly intercepted once. I think it might have been Humphreys. Almost got him, but he was pretty much very accurate. Long on a couple, but you know, he hit through some nice touch. I'd say better touch on his long ball. Plenty of zip on his throws. And defensively, I would go with Abdul Malik McLean. He was pushing I think about 1.5, 2 sacks. A good tackle for loss. He's very disruptive. He had a penalty or so. I know he had one pretty costly penalty on maybe a little late extra, you know, play after the whistle. That was a little costly, but you know, they got some stuff to work on with Jay Serra, as we mentioned, with the penalties. But I thought he looked better, improved from last year when he played at Santa Margarita. That's the UCLA commit. Well, let's look at the schedule, and we'll start with the games on Friday. These are all games September 1st, and we'll touch on them. We're going to have an extended preview on our last game for Friday we'll talk about, which is Mater Dei against Bishop Gorman. That's at St. Anna Stadium. And that game is a 7:30 start, as I understand now, and that game is also on Prime Ticket. But let's start up at the top. Orange Lutheran is going down to San Diego, taking on Cathedral Catholic. Pretty good team out of San Diego. How do you see this game, Scotty?
Cathedral's 0-1 They lost to the state's 27th ranked Del Oro 22-12, and Cathedral's San Diego's Division I,
right?
And they're the number 2 team, but that may change after their loss. But the Dons, they're usually the top-rated team in that San Diego section. They're leaning on a 10-0 JV team. They only return 3 starters on each side of the ball. So I still look for Oulu, keeping their winning ways, and going 2-0.
Yeah, that Del Oro is a pretty good program. I think OC fans are are starting to get to know Del Oro, so I think that's not a bad result. I think it will be a much tougher result, a much tougher game for Lancers this week compared to last week. Del Oro is a team that San Clemente beat last year in the state championship game, and they've been kind of a rising program from Northern California. And Del Oro is actually part of they're going to be down in Southern California at the Mission Viejo Brothers in Arms showcase over the weekend as well. So not a bad, that's a quality team that Cathedral's facing there in Del Oro. They get a lot of transfers, and they're kind of a magnet school up there in their neck of the woods in Northern California. So should be an interesting game. But you think Oulu can get that victory?
Based off of what I recall and what I've know on Cathedral and not having a whole lot of coming back, I'm gonna go with the Lancers. I wouldn't be surprised if Cathedral maybe squeaked one by. If the one thing I guess is concerning is that Oulu didn't really dominate La Mirada. I mean, they were efficient, but they didn't come roaring out with the La Mirada team that didn't have anything coming back. So that may be their concern, but being that Oulu has all those weapons and skills, we'll see if they can put them to use.
Yeah.
And maybe close, but I'm gonna go with the Lancers.
All right. Another, like we said, this is a pretty interesting week. That's a pretty good game right there to start with. It's got another exciting game in the Trinity League. It's going to be big for JSerra. JSerra Lions are playing their first home game at their kind of refurbished and newly formed home football stadium. It's going to be their first game on campus, and they are playing host to Alemany. And Alemany is 1-0. I think they beat San Fernando, if I'm not mistaken. But Alemany is pretty highly regarded. They were a good team in a good league in the Mission League. They struggled in the Mission League last year, but this was an overtime game last year that JSerra won 28-27. And I think a lot of people are looking at this game as kind of a litmus test on how good Alemany is. But Coach Harlow really challenged his team after their Corona Del Mar game, thought that they needed to do a lot of things better, and I'm sure that the Lions are not having an easy week of practice. What's your read on this game, Scotty? Alemany hoping, JSerra trying to get the win at in their first game on the new field.
Yeah, that'll create some excitement, for the community over there. And the Mission League foe, they're known for having some pretty good recruitable players, but this year they don't seem to have anyone highly recruited. They do have a 3-star safety, Elijah Doyle, and a 2-star corner, Steve McIntosh. But other than that, they have Trip Mitchell as a sophomore quarterback, and he looks pretty athletic, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do.
Okay.
They do, they come into the season as the 17th out of 18th team in the Division I, so they're at that the bottom cusp.
Right.
They're projected to be finished 3-7 on the year. So I don't see JSerra having much trouble with Alemany. Based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks of JSerra. It's just again shoring up that defense and doing what they do best and with their balance.
Yep. Now another Trinity League team that's going to be playing a Mission League team, and that's going to be Loyola, and they're going to be home playing host to Santa Margarita, and Loyola's 1-0. They took care of Fairfax last week. We don't hear much about Fairfax too much, But Loyola won 52-7 last week. Last year, I remember Santa Margarita had one of their better games against Loyola, so I can see Santa Margarita doing pretty well in this game as well. Last year, it was Santa Margarita won 37-7. What do you think? I mean, you think the Eagles can go on the road and kind of repeat that again this year?
I believe so. Loyola, they actually, we talked about Alemany being the 17th ranked. Loyola is the 18th ranked, team in Division I. So that's the last, team of the D1s. And, and the highlight of the game is of last week was actually Loyola started a freshman quarterback. By the name of Miller Moss. And he's actually, I guess, the second, we were saying he's the second freshman in the Cub history to start at QB. I guess there was another freshman in the 50s that played. But here's an interesting tidbit, and most people will say big deal, who cares? But Miller Moss played with Mater Dei's passing team, the Fort Vert team. It's the incoming ninth graders that play. He played on the Mater Dei team that led the team to the title game during the summer. So and it would be interesting to see how he does against a Trinity League team.
Okay.
But Santa Margarita is vastly different than the LA City Fairfax. So I think Santa Margarita comes away with the win. So but it will be interesting to see how the freshman quarterback does against them. He was in I think there was a 3-man race for that spot, and they ended up going with him. So
okay. Oh, interesting. All right, I did not know that. Well, good one there for us, Scotty. Pulling out the knowledge. Last one on Friday night before we get to the big one, but it's going to be American Fort, Utah, taking on Servite. This is part of the Brothers in Arms Showcase, which is a 3-day showcase down that the Mission Viejo Diablos host. It goes Thursday, Friday, Saturday. This is a 5 o'clock game at Mission Viejo High School on Friday. A 5 o'clock start for Servite. Friars are taking on this American Fort team from Utah. I think they're about 7th or 8th ranked in their state of Utah. I think they're 1-1 on the year. So they've been pretty solid. I think the game they lost was pretty close in-state game, but seems like a solid opponent. I don't know if they're as good as and they might be a little bit better than Norco. 5 o'clock start, could still be pretty warm on Friday. What do you think about this game for the Friars?
Yeah, I mean, American Fort, they've come out here before. They I think it was 10 years ago. I think the Mike Barkley era, they played Mater Dei out here, and I think they're the state's Utah's number 12th ranked team to open the season, and they have a 54-39 win over Weber, and then last week they lost 34-33 to Timpview.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I mean, they seem like they look like they score a lot of points. It looks like they give up a lot of points, so maybe an interesting game. But they have, this is their third game, so they have 3 games under their belt, and so that makes for interesting in itself. So, it's hard to kind of gauge these out-of-state teams that are more under the radar than these more national teams. So yeah,
exactly. It's interesting you mentioned they have scored a lot of points. Their quarterback is Bronson Barron, who is a 6'3", 210 senior, and has had some good games. He's actually had 2 great games. In the opener against Weber, he threw for 374 yards, 4 TDs and a pick. Last week, he said against Timpview, who I think is part of the showcase out here as well. I think they're on the schedule as well. But he threw 47 times for 382 yards, 3 TDs, but 3 picks. So they're obviously throwing the ball around. Timpview is this week is ranked 4th in the state of Utah. So It probably is a tougher game, and it'll be interesting to see how Servite's defense, if they can, kind of put the clamps on another opponent. The power in Utah is, of course, Bingham. They've kind of been the power for a few years now, as long as I remember. So I think it's going to be a pretty tough game for Friars.
Yeah, if I recall, American Fork, even back in 2004 or 5 when they came out to play, MD, they were a solid team back then. So they just probably haven't been on the map. But for them to come, they shouldn't be a slouch, coming to be invited to these showcases. So
yeah. All right, now the big game of the week, one we've been waiting for a long time. Mater Dei, number 1 Orange County, number 1 in the nation's taking on number 2 Bishop Gorman out of Las Vegas. Undefeated. They're actually, last year they're number 2 in the nation by Max Preps. They are riding a 55-game winning streak, which is the second longest active streak in the United States. They, interestingly enough, is for all the credentials they have, their high-profile glitzy program, play real physical. They have a first-year starting quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Richardson. His nickname is DTR, UCLA commit. Dual threat. He's a first-year starter because he's been backing up Tate Martell, who's now at Ohio State. And I saw Dorian's highlights last week. They did a pretty good job and beat DeMatha, a nationally ranked team out of Maryland. Dorian's a fired-up guy. He is a very good athlete. Had good zip on his passes. Very athletic, and he was playing with a lot of energy. And he was, excitable type of leader. And they got some speed at receiver. But Scotty, what's your read on this game? Where, maybe we're going to see. I assume we're going to see Amon-Ra St. Brown, C.J. Parks. This is a big one for Mater Dei. Bishop Amat is over. Their next week they play La Mirada. I feel like this game is right between those two, and Mater Dei they're gonna give everything they got to win this game. They've never played Gorman before. This is a big spot, and Mater Dei's at home. I think they're gonna let it rip in this game.
Yeah, we just, like I said when I opened up the show, we all hope the game, lives up to its billing, and I say that because, if MD chooses to play, this new way of offense, they may be playing into Gorman's hands, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from the mid-MD people, but, Gorman is Gorman. Gorman is good, but they are not the same Gorman of the past 3 years. So, new faces have emerged on both sides of the ball. You touched on, quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He takes over, QB. He was a starting receiver last year.
Right.
He is a dual threat, and his favorite target is Arizona State commit Speedy Naylor, who actually played his youth ball in California. So he's actually a Californian, and he chose to go play his high school ball at Gorman. And then, on defense, they are small but very quick. And I'm speaking, linebackers with the exception of a few guys, but their secondary is very small. Both starting corners go 5'8", 5'10", and one of the starting corners is a former Monarch, Noah Lopez, who played his freshman year at Mater Dei, and he's over there, so he's starting at one corner. Gorman's stud defensive leaders are their middle linebacker Pele Goa. I'm going to butcher this one. Goa Tate. He's a USC commit. They have defensive end Adam Plant. He's an Arizona commit. Then they have another defensive end, Falcon Kuamaya Trule. And get this, Plant and Kuamatele are both booking DNs who go 6'5" and 6'8". So those two guys in the end, are going to either bat passes down or you're going to have to get the ball over them, which is going to be interesting. And then speaking about passing, DeMatha, who didn't have a solid passing game, but when they did complete the ball, they moved the ball on Gorman, but they just couldn't sustain drives effectively to hurt Gorman. And then when they had a super sophomore running back and he got hurt, and when he got hurt, their offense kind of went downhill and they couldn't run the ball. effectively. But if I say this, if Mater Dei plays offense like they did last week, I don't see Mater Dei snapping that 55-game winning streak. Defensively, they're going to need to contain Robinson and Miami commit their tight end Brevin Jordan, who's that's the key to the game. Those two guys. Brevin is a big time tight end. He goes about 6'3", 240, but he can move, and it's going to be interesting to see who matches up with him and how they utilize him. But Mater Dei has the linebackers this year to do that, so we'll have to see. But I'm sure Mater Dei knows, going in, it's going to take more than a workman-like offense to take down, one of the nation's longest, winning streaks. If Mater Dei gets back to their air raid, with shades of the run game, they win. If MD goes more balanced and tries to slow the pace, I think Gorman pulls it out in a close one.
And why do you think that's because you think that's more of Gorman's style?
No, meaning Gorman's style as in.
Well, why do you think it hurts the Mater Dei to run the ball so much or be a little bit more conservative?
Because last week they just didn't seem very. It was against Bishop Amat. Gorman is not Amat.
Yeah.
It was very workmanlike. The offensive line didn't get a lot of push. It was 4-7, 4-3. They never broke anything longer than 15. It was just vanilla. It was just odd. Because everybody's like, okay, well, yeah, Mater Dei wants to run the ball, but it wasn't like they didn't go the read option. They didn't spread it out and have running lanes for the backs. They chose to go two tight ends and a fullback, and just kind of just eat the clock and then win it with their defense. And that's what they want to choose to do. I guess as fans, everybody's kind of spoiled because we got to see the air show and they just mowed people down. Obviously they didn't have Amon-Ra and they didn't have CJ, but those two are expected back. So we'll have to see what that if they come back, and that definitely changes the look because. But that's my take with if they choose to do that running style. But that's just the take, and people say, well, who are you to say that? But that's just my take. So
no, and I think, and I can see it too. I mean, maybe because it looks like that. I watched the Dorian highlights. He had some. They had some explosive plays, and maybe they have. And Mater Dei is going to have to match some of that big play, which they're certainly capable. Because you mentioned Naylor, right? He had a 68-yard play. In that he had a very long play. This another receiver, or he might be a running back, Tillman, is very fast. I know he had a 30-some-odd yard play, and so did Tellis. I think it was another receiver, had a 30-yard play. So I think they had at least three plays, two 30-yard plays, and a 68-yard play. So they didn't break that kind of runs, but they had some long pass plays, and maybe they have some firepower that Mater Dei needs to contend with.
Yeah, like I said, they're small but quick. All those guys, they other than the tight end, all their skill guys, the receivers are all, even the running back, they're all 5'11" and smaller. So, if you get Dorian, if he gets outside the pocket, he can either make plays, and if you break down, he can hit the guys down the field, which I think that's what he did on a couple of those plays. They almost become broken plays, and he hits the receiver downfield when the DB decides to come up or gets lost. Trying to break it down to stop his scramble. Yeah. So.
Well, one of the story ideas that I'm kind of interested to do, and maybe explore this week with my coverage of Mater Dei is, maybe what this game and this opportunity represents for that Mater Dei offensive line. With so many guys back and the personnel they have on that team, are we going to see a dominant offensive line for Mater Dei? Will they harken back to some of the when they it's been a long time since they won a section championship, and they've had some brutally tough offensive lines. Are they going to head back a little bit in that direction, which would be surprising to me? can these, because Gorman's going to have to. That's a kind of team that you're going to have to really. It's going to be physical in the trenches, and is Mater Dei looking at their offensive line as a big opportunity to impose their will. That's a storyline for me. I wonder how that young secondary is going to do against DTR. I wonder if DTR is going to be running, or how they're going to do against these quick receivers. There's no returning starters in the secondary for Mater Dei. And I also wonder about those high-profile Mater Dei receivers that are so ultra-talented. Amon-Ra St. Brown's the best receiver in this game. Is he going to take it over? C.J. Parks might be the second best receiver in this game. Is he going to take it over? Brew McCoy's on the rise. I mean, this is I feel like it could be a statement game for SoCal, and specifically these SoCal receivers. This is our year, and we're gonna oppose it. I would throw Nico in there as well. So that could be interesting, like you said. But that's what you're kind of calling for too. That air raid situation. But I think there's a lot of pride in that receiving group, and this is a great chance for them to show it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like the story with the line because that is true. Because they do have those two defensive linemen, and whether or not if those two guys get pushed, then that's going to disrupt everything. So and Rollo will tell you that it's got to start there. They have to win in the trenches. Whether or not they want to run the ball or they want to pass protection, it's going to have to start there. And we'll just have to wait and see. It's going to be fun, having to, it's like trying to match up all these X's and O's and matchups, and, if who's going to play where, whether or not, who's going to have the big game, and like Rollo always says, in these big games, there's always one player that always makes a big play, so there's, that as well. And the other thing about Gorman is that in games I've seen Gorman have been down, they've always come back in the second half. In that against Bosco, Bosco had him on the ropes, and
right.
And I think last year, when they were playing, St. Thomas Aquinas, they were down, and they just know, again, it's all pretty much all new guys, but it's the program, it's the coaching staff, and like almost this is reminiscent of the De La Salle days back in the
right.
98s when Mater Dei played De La Salle, and De La Salle had that winning streak, and they came down, and Mater Dei had the best team in a long time to snap it, and there was two plays, 3rd and 32, where Atari Collin runs a trap on that 3rd down, and he gets the first down and that touchdown, and that ends up being the difference in the ball game. And everybody in Mater Dei lore knows 3rd and 32 in that game, and that ended up being the difference in that 28-21 game, and that this could be, and everyone's kind of feeling that same thing, and that it has that lore to it. So, we'll see, is that the same De La Salle mystique that, does Gorman have that same, that same mystique that comes with it? But those, and those who have followed football long enough understand what I'm talking about. Those who don't, have followed it that long enough to understand that analogy between, the Mater Dei De La Salle of 98 in this game. So,
well, it's really an opportunity for Mater Dei. If that's true, and I believe it is true, Scotty, what you're saying, this is quite an opportunity for Mater Dei to stamp its legacy and really show its cards for what it's about this year. Are they gonna, what kind of group? Obviously it's a long year. They still have Bergen in a couple weeks is looking like a pretty darn good opponent as well. And we know the Trinity League's there. But Mater Dei's, they're about winning the CIF championship this year in Division One. They feel like this is their, it's kind of CIF or bust for them. And the last time they were in a really big game, that was last early December at Angel Stadium, and they had a tough go. And they had so the lights are going to be back on. They're at home. But who do you think there's more pressure on? I think Gorman doesn't blink. Like, we play a national schedule, we come back on people. We've been beating Bosco. So we won 15-5. We don't feel the pressure. But then again, I don't know how much pressure is it really on Mater Dei. But they're ranked number 1. But they're at home. I mean, do you think Mater Dei is at all feeling pressured by this game? Because I don't really think Gorman's going to be pressured by it at all.
You know, that is interesting because of the fact that, you know, it is Gorman and has national implications, but it's not the end all be all, which is obviously the CIF championship.
Right.
But yes, this is a big step in that road. You know, you want to come out on top, but you know, if for instance, if guys aren't healthy, you know, do you play them just to play this game because it's a national spotlight? You know, you want to be in. You know, that's where sometimes these things have to be, you know, taken into consideration.
Sure.
So that's why we are, you know, wondering does Amon-Ra and CJ, you know, do they come back for this game? You know, apparently we were told that yes they are, but that was last week. So and you know, when you look at Bosco's going to say, you know, I know we're talking Mater Dei here, but they're going to say the same thing when they play these national championship games, and I mean these national, you know, games that are like national championship games because they have these, you know, mythical implications, you know, and they'll tell you, you know, that it's nice, you know, once we lose them, okay, now it's behind us. Now we're moving on to what we, you know, and that's what they've done well. You know, they've lost, you know, 1 or 2 early on, and they've come on and planted their seed, and look where they are. You know, it's
exactly.
Yes, it's nice to win these out of state games, and that's the thing that everybody's talking about is that California hasn't done well in these out of state games. You know, they've come so close. You know, everybody talks about the Trinity League being, you know, the best league, but yet these out of state games they haven't fared, you know, too well. So it does have, you know, that mystique with it, but you know, I think, you know, in the long run you have to, you know, look at it and say, hey, what do we get out of this? You know, is it are we putting all our eggs in one basket for this game, or are we gonna show our cards, you know, or do we have a special package for this game, or are we just gonna do what we decided to do at the beginning of the season?
Yeah.
You know, that's the question, you know, we ask, you know, what I wonder with Mater Dei, and that's why I say if they choose to do that, you know, it didn't look as formidable as they were last year. So if you follow my drift in that long-winded answer.
No, I gotcha. And you know, Mater Dei is still looking at, you know, probably playing Bosco twice, and teams like Bishop Gorman don't have to worry about their in-state winning their section title. I mean, these are their games. And it probably helps them a lot. You know, these are their big games, and later in the year they cruise in the playoffs in their own state. So, but speaking of those Braves, and I think this is a good way to end the show here on this particular game. But we also have St. John Bosco playing Garces of Bakersfield down on Saturday night. But anything to say about this game down at the Brothers in Arms Showcase?
Garces, they're 0-1. They're coming off a 23-14 loss against Bakersfield Christian, and they are coached by former Servite head coach AJ Gass, who was he was 7-4 last season. So, you know, on paper this looks like a mismatch. You know, I can't see Bosco having trouble. They're probably going to get after it, especially, you know, taking it out of their last week's loss. So they have a lot of stuff that they probably want to work on. So, you know, Bosco's going to win this in usual Bosco fashion big. So
I agree with you there, Scotty, for sure. So, well, yeah, I want to thank Scotty Barras for all that work on the Trinity League Football Podcast. Scotty, we will enjoy the week getting ready for the Mater Dei game, and I will see you at Santa Ana Stadium.
Alrighty, Dan. Look forward to it.
It's going to be a great game, and thank you for everyone, all the fans joining us on another Trinity League Football Podcast.